right, welcome to the Exitable Business Podcast. This is Patrick Rogers, where we discuss how to create enterprise value all of the time, how to double and triple the value of your business now, not just when it's time to sell or when you get an offer to sell. This is episode number 16, and today we have the ultimate privilege to have Jason Yardley on the show. And Jason is the CEO of Knotion Health. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Patrick, thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to have a conversation with you today. So thank you.
Yeah, same here, man. Especially when we get into some of your credentials and what you're doing now, it's just super exciting and very privileged to have you here. So Jason is the CEO, president. He's CEO of Knotion Health. He's a president, board member, innovator, entrepreneur, speaker, and an Amazon.com best-selling author of a book called Rev Up. It's a bold and disruptive strategies to rev up your revenue cycle hero's journey. Jason's been featured on radio and podcast programs around the country, including NPR, iHeartRadio. Again, he's currently a CEO of Knotion Health. Prior career experience includes executive positions with Avidine Health and a number of other leading healthcare service institutions. Jason's an active member of the Healthcare Financial Management Association, lives with his wife, Holly, and 2 teenage children in Newport Beach, California. Jason, I'd love to always open up the show with, a little bit of an icebreaker thing, something a little bit fun. What's one interesting fact about yourself that many people may not know?
The interesting fact about myself I'll share with you is I am a champion demolition derby car driver. So when you drive the cars and smash them into each other, and last car running wins. Few years ago, before COVID, actually won the Orange County Fair here in Southern California. I've done it a few times, and if you're looking for an adrenaline rush and you don't mind getting banged around a little bit, it was a very fun experience that I've had the opportunity to do. My wife actually does it too in the women's category.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Wow. Championship. Okay, so it's called a championship demolition derby driver.
Yeah, there you go.
That is insane. You're going to say something about your wife?
Oh, it's funny. She actually has a bit of a persona. She's a part of a group of ladies called the Damsels of Destruction. But they actually, when they do their demolition derbies, they raise money for Susan G. Komen, breast cancer research, and other things. And she has a bit of a side persona as the Pink Punisher. So we have fun making up our card and everything. I did not get as creative when the few times that I've done it, but has been some great outcomes for us. It's very, very fun and very interesting actually to think about a strategy of being successful in that type of environment that's very different.
Right? Yeah. I just I trying to put myself into the mindset that goes on when you're in there, and it just, what are the feelings that are going through your mind when you're in there? Is it almost like a release of stress and energy, or what's going on in there?
I got to tell you, so when the first time that we did it was actually the time I won. I've taken first and second place in different opportunities. I was scared to death. We were watching a different race beforehand, which was a figure 8 race, and it was all police chiefs and fire captains that were driving those cars. Yeah. And I actually knew a couple of people that were going to be driving with me, and I just remember looking at the guy next to me, thinking, God, he is so calm, and like my heart is beating out of my chest. And we go and do the race, and afterwards, we like giving each other high fives and everything, that we made it through, and both of us had done pretty well in it. And I said to him, I said, my God, you seem so confident and calm going through that. He said, I thought the same thing about you. And I said, man, my heart was beating out of my chest. I thought I was gonna have a heart attack. He said, I went to the restroom 10 times before we actually started that race. So it was great to know that we both had some trepidation going into it. But once you're into it, it's just on. There is a strategy part to it, funny enough, but it was a very interesting experience, to say the least.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I understand from our last conversation, you have a little bit of a celebration going on in your family.
We absolutely do. I'm so proud of my son. He just turned 18. His sport of choice is rowing. And here in Southern California, he's been very successful. His team made it to the national finals and took second place for the nation. But then he was invited to the U.S. rowing selection camp, and we just found out a couple of weeks ago that he made the U.S. rowing team, the under-19 team, and he is already in Italy going to race against 7 other countries. And so my wife and I and daughter are headed to Italy on Monday to go watch him race in international competition, which is, for for a great kid who just started rowing 4 years ago to now see him
Yeah.
competing at the international level.
Wow.
And he made the rowing team at Cal, which is where he's off to college after this. And it's been an incredible thing to watch, and incredible. I wasn't a rower, to learn all the things about
Right.
rowing and the teamwork that goes into that. Some of the
Mm.
analogies to business as well, but super excited and proud of what he's doing, and go Team USA.
Man, that is awesome. Congratulations. You got to be so proud as a father, and
Mhm.
just to just think about the 18-year-old boy who is experiencing so much success and accomplishment directly related to the amount of effort and energy and persistence he's been putting into it. That's what a life lesson to learn at 18.
Just one comment about that. You think about the level of effort that they put into practice. So as a team, they would practice 3 to 4 hours. I'm sorry, no, 6 hours basically every day. Right? A few
Six
hours in
hours
the
a day.
morning, several hours in the afternoon.
Wow.
So at least four, if not up to 6 hours a day. And an entire race lasts less than 6 minutes. So
Wow.
all of the hours of preparation that go into that when you go to a regatta, you might race 2 or 3 times over the course of several days, making it ultimately to the finals in that final race. But the level of preparation that goes
Mm.
into it, the
Yeah.
level of just
Yeah.
very specific honing your craft that goes into
Mm.
it, and then the level of teamwork that's required to be successful in a boat, is in a rowboat, is remarkable.
The alignment that has to be there, very similar to business, right? In your experience.
100%. For example, in the what they refer to as the 8-person boat, the 8-man plus or eight plus boat, there are 8 rowers, each who hold a single oar and a coxswain. Now the coxswain's not holding an oar, but the coxswain is giving direction to the rest of the boat on
Mm.
the speed with which to go, the different tactics to follow, not unlike a leader in business.
Sure.
And then the very first person in the boat is called the stroke seat, and they listen to the guidance that's coming from the coxswain, and they set the pace as the real person who's actually rowing. And
Oh.
then every rower behind that tries to effectively match the pace of the rower in front of them while they're going backwards.
Mhm.
So as you think
Good luck.
about, executives and setting a course for a company, but like I say to my company, and I'm very thankful for the people that work in our organization, very thankful for the people on the front lines that are doing the work.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that work every day. They are doing that work every day. They are the ones that have the oars in their hands every day,
Sure.
that are
Sure.
moving our boat forward, um, at some guidance and direction from the executive team, certainly.
Yeah.
But the analogies are very interesting, because it takes that sort of well-oiled machine and a level of communication and a level of belief and commitment and everything else. It's amazing what they're able to do in that boat, and I very much think it's very analogous to what we try and do in business.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. So you've been a part of two exits now, and you're building your company now. Obviously, very successful history. If you would give us just a high level overview of your journey and kind of what's brought you to where you are today, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely happy to. So my background is in healthcare, the business of healthcare, which we refer to as the revenue cycle instead of hospitals or provider organizations. Think of it as like admitting all the medical records and billing functions. All of that wrapped together is the revenue cycle side of healthcare and hospitals. I've had the opportunity right out of college. I went to work for the large consulting firms
Hmm.
for 10 years, which was great because it gave me a broad perspective on how different hospitals and health systems worked across the country,
Right. Mhm.
and the different things that they encountered, and to get to work with just incredible professionals with such deep knowledge and expertise that you can't ask for a greater place to kind of grow up initially, if you
Yeah.
will. And then I saw that this outsourcing function within the business side of hospitals and health systems was really taking off. So I joined a company, ran one of the largest projects that we had, and ended up becoming president of that company.
Hmm.
We sold that company, but I
Mm.
had the opportunity to go work for another much larger company, where I was both in strategy and operations. I led a large team, 5,000 people across 17 different offices, and some offshore components as well.
Yeah.
And then for my last two roles, I've had the opportunity to work for private equity owned
Mm,
organizations.
mhm,
The last one I was CEO of Knotion Health, and we were
mhm.
able to sell that to a strategic partner, had a successful exit for that private equity firm. And over the past year now, I've had the opportunity to work for just a great private equity firm here at Knotion Health, which we just rebranded from, we were Our Source Healthcare. We just rebranded to Knotion Health. And as you said, we're working on building a wonderful organization and building the value in that organization. And that at some point there will be some financial event. But as we talked about in our board meeting this week, this is all about building a great company and a
Mm.
great company that has value. And what will come with that.
Awesome. So you're currently building that value, building that company and enterprise value in your current company, and you've had a ton of experience in preparing for exit before. What do you think were the top, two or three things that you focused on when you're creating that enterprise value when preparing for exit?
Mhm. It's a number of things. One is growth. So the ability to prove that top line wise you are growing, and
Hmm.
that you're growing at a significant clip. You got to be growing at least in double digits to really start to build value, and preferably you're growing at over 20% a year. So in
Sure.
order to do that, you're creating a great sales team and a great sales process, but also all of the messaging that's in the market, all of the marketing that goes along with that as well. So it's one component would certainly be growth on the top line.
Top line
The
growth.
next,
Okay.
yeah, the next piece would be profitability within your operation. So a focus
Mm.
on those gross margin numbers,
Hmm.
and that
Sure.
you're appropriately have right sized the company, if you will, from a operations perspective
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
drive good gross margins. And then, of course, the bottom line, right? Are you ultimately a profitable company, which means if you manage those SG&A lines within your business, and you have a great growth story there as well. So to really drive value. Sometimes people talk about the rule of 40 and such, that between your uh, growth in your top line and growth or in your actual EBITDA percentage,
Hmm.
if the two of those added together are greater than 40, that starts to put you in kind of rarefied air in terms of how others might look at you from a valuation perspective. And that's really our goal. There's a lot of other things that go into sort of culture and mission and the like, but when it comes down to just the measurement of value, it's typically those things that I described.
Yeah, yeah. And you had also mentioned before, kind of you were talking about the need to be a good storyteller,
Hmm.
supported by your delivery. Tell me more about that.
At times, if someone asks me, "Hey, as a CEO, what do you really do?" My answer is, "I am chief storyteller and experience creator."
Okay.
And really, that's both internally and externally. So in terms of working with our board, our ownership, as well as our executive team, is creating not only the mission, vision, and values of the business as we move forward, but then the story around all of that, the story around why we do what we do, to get the company energized around each individual being able to see themselves in that story and the important role that they play.
That
We
each
talk
person
about
plays.
for each person, absolutely. The worst thing I can think of is you have a holiday and a team member or an employee is talking to that uncle at the barbecue, and they say, "What do you do?" And they don't have a good story behind that around
Mm,
what they do. I love that in our organization. I hope that people say that they support healthcare and the health of communities all across the country.
mm,
Now, I might be helping a hospital collect more dollars from an insurance company, or I might be doing a technology role, or I might be in sales and marketing. That might be the function that I provide, but the
right.
overall thing that I do is that I make healthcare better in this country. If you can believe in that and you see that what you do every day helps to lend into that, I think that's a powerful thing. And to paint the right picture,
Sure.
storytelling plays a role in that. It's not to tell the story just to believe it, but certainly telling the story internally is helpful for that. And then to tell the story externally around our business and many of the levers that I told you about in terms of growth and what makes us differentiated and why
Mm,
do customers want to buy from us and why do customers want to stay with us, all plays a role in storytelling and making things relatable along the way. So it's both leadership and sales by storytelling.
Yeah, and I want to build on something you just said that, and I don't hear a lot of people talk about this, which is very interesting. And Patrick Lencioni talks about it in the truth about employee engagement and irrelevance is one of those, and the measurement is when people don't have that direct line of sight to why they're doing what they're doing and their connection to the overall greater good of making healthcare a better place. And it
Mhm.
seems like you have just really nailed that with your organizations and really bring the employee in on the overall story.
I mentioned that we recently went through a rebranding. We went from
Hmm.
one name of a company to a new name and everything that goes
Yeah,
along with that.
yeah,
And I feel very fortunate that we went through that process because it allowed us the opportunity to go back and revisit our why of what we do, what we do. And if
yeah.
you can get centered around, that why, and I know there's a lot about this in the market, and there's been some very popular conversations and TED Talks and things around this in the recent past. Uh, the rebranding really allowed us to go through that process and to reshare that and reinvigorate it with the entire company and build from that perspective. So if as an organization you can all buy into what we do every day is to truly make healthcare better across the country,
Mm,
as well as I have team members all across the country, but hopefully they also get excited about knowing that they are literally helping to improve someone's life in another part of the country that will never have the opportunity to say thank you to
yeah,
them or never have the
yeah,
opportunity to connect with them. But they're truly doing an important thing that is helping others. And coming out of COVID and some of the challenges we've just had and economic challenges and everything else, I hope that is a vision and a mission that our teams can really get behind and feel good about what they do every day.
yeah. And so having that good story, being that good storyteller as a CEO too, you're storytelling on the inside. You're also storytelling on general sales to your clients. I got to imagine that also is a very much needed skill when you're looking to sell the business.
100%. In fact, even it's interesting because when you go through that process of selling a business, and the process I've gone through a few times, you create what gets lovingly referred to as the book. Well, what better definition of storytelling than is you are literally creating the book that you tell your
Okay.
story from, and it's that book or sim that gets sent out to prospective buyers if you're working with an investment
Uh-huh.
banker or if you're
Uh-huh.
working directly with people. You literally document your story, and one of the early
Mm,
steps in that process for those that are interested is often to go through either a limited or a full management presentation where then live you are provided the
yeah.
opportunity to tell your story.
Right.
There is few things more important as you go through the beginning of that process is to tell the story, but
Right.
then you have to have built the organization that can support the story as you go through all the due diligence steps, of course.
Mm. So you were almost, do you feel like you kind of write the story or the outline for the chapters in the book beforehand, and then you kind of fill it in as you're approaching, the sale date or an exit or acquisition goal,
There is there. So I don't know if I mentioned this before, but this was literally board meeting week for us. And one of the conversations with our private equity ownership, as well as with our executive team and our board, is what is the plan looking for the next couple of years, and how does that reset our priorities, and where do we think that we can drive valuation for this organization as others might be taking a look at it, and aligning all of those components so that yes, we've written the outline, we've written how we would like the story to ultimately be able to be told, and now it's really comes down to execution to be able to drive the various components throughout the organization to bring that story to life, if you will, so that when we look a
yeah,
year, 3, 5 years down the road,
right.
that story has come to life. We're drawing the outlines today, and we color it in as we move forward, and as well as you adapt the story as you move forward as well, whether it's because of market conditions or you just adjust along the way. But you're absolutely right. You're at least from my perspective and how we take a look at doing it is you're writing the outline ahead of time and then
Right.
adding all of that great content.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, you being so intentional about the long-term vision, the exit strategy, and building the company to match that exit, or the one day, the end, the long-term goal. So many business owners are not being that intentional. And do you think, like, is there like a certain size of companies, like sometimes people will feel like, oh, I'm not big enough to even worry about that. What would your give advice to CEOs of maybe 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, $10 million, any companies, maybe in your field, maybe not in your field?
You know, two pieces of feedback. One is the organization's looking for you to set, as a CEO, looking for you to set that vision, and the board, and whatever your ownership structure is, but to set that vision, or to set the outline of it, so that people can then once again figure out how they fit into that story. What
Yeah.
role am I
Yeah.
playing? What character am I in leading
Which is
to the
so important.
success of this
Sure.
story?
Yeah.
That's one part of feedback on that. The second part
Right.
is, it's really easy to get bogged down into
Mm,
today's fire and
yes.
to lose sight of the broader story. And
Yes.
I know it's something that I end up being challenged with. Of the next email could be the email that takes you down the rabbit hole of where
Right.
you end up focused and
Right.
drive different communications and emotions and everything else that comes along with it. But there needs to be this constant sort of resetting of,
Mm,
let's get back to the big story, and what chapter are we in, and how do we continue to realign everyone so that we're focused on the most important things. There's always going to be an ability to get caught up in whatever today's tragedy or fire is, but how do we continue to reset priorities, and continue to get back focused on our broader story?
yeah, and I think that's so important, being able to stay aligned as the CEO specifically, because they're always going to be pulling you like an octopus. They're going to be pulling you this way or that way, trying to bring you down into the bilges as much as they can. And you're the only person many times that's going to be there to make sure that you're steering in the right direction. Yeah,
But there is certainly truth to that. I am also blessed. I have an amazing executive team and management team,
fantastic.
and we
Yeah.
all pull together. You mentioned Patrick Lencioni. I am a very big believer in the five dysfunctions of a team,
Oh,
and that as
yeah.
an organization, both at the executive level and then down through management, push through the organization, we need to build relationships. We need to build trust. We need to be able to have those difficult conversations. So at times, I might be the one who's going down the rabbit hole, and I might have
Okay.
one of my executive team members who is able to have the conversation with me to say, "Hey, look, let's get back on the highway, and get off the side street that we took here, and let's get back after the broad vision." So there's certainly an important role of surrounding yourself. One, hopefully having a good understanding of self and the things that you're good at and the things that you
Yeah.
could you
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
use some support around,
Uh-huh.
having a great team together, and then building that team so that you can have some of those conversations, and all of us play a role in driving the success of the organization.
Sure. So you brought up the Patrick Lencioni, the five dysfunctions of a team. I love that. I'm a huge fan as well. If you could kind of walk us through, what it was like before in your executive team, before you kind of went down this, working with the five dysfunctions of a team model, and then afterwards, what kind of things did you see differently?
Ours is a unique situation.
Yeah.
Our company was acquired from two founders, and,
Uh-huh.
and the company was acquired by a private equity firm. One of the founders left relatively soon after that. The private equity firm then was faced with needing to put in effectively a new executive team over time. So our executive team, there's eight of us I consider our executive team.
Hmm.
Six of us are new in the last 18 months.
Wow.
On the one
That's pretty
hand,
new. Hmm.
it is very new. On the one hand, I feel great about it because I feel like I have the opportunity. I get to manage somewhat of an all-star team, right? Where you get
Right.
to go
Right.
out and recruit and bring all these great people that are great resources in their area of focus, or departments, or what have you, in their expertise. But on the other hand, it's eight of us that have virtually no relationship, right? We
Mm,
we we didn't grow up together in the business. We
yeah.
haven't
Yeah.
necessarily worked together. So for us, I actually brought in an outside consultant to help us build that teaming. We did a couple of things. Number one, we did some assessments of ourselves individually,
Sure.
and then shared and talked about those so that we could learn more about one another, and we could learn about our styles, and we could learn about the things that if you really want to upset me, do X, Y, and Z, right? And we talked about that as individuals, so we could learn about one another. We also learned what were our drivers, what were the things that excited us, what were the things that really drove us, and that began to lay the foundation for us. One, you know, you don't have to be best friends with everybody that you're working with, but
Hmm.
as you get to know them, it
Mm.
allows you to be much more humanized in your conversations with them, especially with us all being remote these days, and to really get an idea for who that individual is and how you work best with them. And then from there, we built upon having the conversations of trust, having the conversations
Wow.
around.
Yeah.
To have a difficult conversation doesn't mean that I am attacking you or your ideas. It might
Mm.
just mean that I have a different perspective. Let's talk about those different perspectives. Let's come up with the right decision as a team. And
Mm.
when we leave this room, we are all supporting whatever that decision is, even if it's not the one that you promoted, you know, originally. And
Right.
that whole transition is not an easy place to get to, you know,
No.
particularly with, you know, having new team members and what have you. So it has certainly been a transition.
Yeah.
I can
Yep.
tell you the executive team that we are today is a different executive team than we were even 100 days ago.
Mm.
As we've worked through our transition, as we've worked through getting closer and building out our relationships. And I like to think that that then trickles through the rest of the organization, that then our leadership teams and our middle management not only see that in our interactions, but also we start modeling the behavior that we look for in the rest of the organization.
Sure.
And it just becomes how we work together.
Yeah, so it kind of starts trickling down from the top, from the
Mhm.
executive team that's gone through this. They're living this new team building method, trust, accountability, conflict, all that, and then it kind of goes throughout the entire organization.
And once
Yeah,
again, back to storytelling, we
yeah.
literally have the ability to then, inside of the individual departments and things, to be able to tell our own story. Hey, look, when we got together, we didn't know each other as well. We have worked through that process. We trust each other. We have these conversations where maybe we don't agree, but we find a
Mm.
common ground and we move forward. How are we going to do that in whatever department or whatever area that we're talking about? So hopefully, like I said, it's been good behavior that's can be modeled throughout the rest of the company.
Wow. And I know, you know, that was a big part of what we were talking about before with culture. What other kind of things do you think that you guys have been focusing on and doing at Notion, and or what are you going to be doing that's going to help build that culture that you want to have?
The first step is just establishing it and writing it down and documenting it. So that was one of the items we've done, in particular through our rebranding. When we
Okay.
talk about where did the name come from? So Notion is the intersection and combination of knowledge and innovation.
I love that.
And so you take the KNOW from knowledge and the
Uh-huh.
TION from the end of innovation, you marry those two together and you get Notion.
Okay.
Telling that type of story of where the name come from in communication. Previously we were our source, and so we referred all of us internally referred to ourselves as our sourcians. So you'd send an all hands email and it would be dear our sourcians, right? Well, as we went through our rebranding, we put it out to the company for people to recommend how do we refer to each other moving forward. And then we had a vote within the company of how we would refer to each other. And so one of the what ended up winning was that we would refer to ourselves as innovators, and spelled differently using the Notion kind of spelling, which is
Right,
great
right.
because hopefully that made everyone in the company feel like they were really a part of that rebranding and that
Mm.
process. So
Mhm.
back to the answer being just, you know, one is documenting it and having the hard conversations to really kind of define what that is, and then laying out a communication strategy so that there is this continued communication throughout the company around culture. And to be successful, I think you also have to have a culture that clearly defines results and
Mm.
accountability, and
Mhm.
that being a part of all that communication as well.
Yeah, fantastic. What other kind of things are you guys doing in Notion or have done or going to be doing to focus on building that enterprise value as you go down this journey?
We've uh, trying to do a number of things at the same time.
Okay.
The first is with the rebranding and a
Yep.
go to market strategy that
Yep.
helps on that top line. That's
Okay.
what, you know, one of the first items. And to give credit to our team, our growth has been remarkable this year. In the first 6 months of the year, we We have outsold everything we did in the previous year, and we're coming up on outselling everything we've done in the previous 2 years. So our
Right.
growth is just off to a great launch. I think a lot of that has to do with not only the messaging, the leadership, the growth of the team, just a number of different things that goes into it. We've got some great marketing and items we've gone to market with, which is, I think, really helped us.
And Jason, real quick, not to interrupt, are you comfortable sharing for the audience just about the size of your company, how large you guys are?
Yeah, I won't put it in. Sure. So we have, roughly 500 people. What's
Okay.
interesting about us is that our organization was fully remote even prior to COVID. So our 500 people are spread out across 41 different states.
Wow.
But what that allows us to do is, healthcare is a very localized regional thing. It allows us to have our teams local to many of our clients across the country, and that creates some differentiators for us in some of our service lines, as well. And then we have clients across 37 states, and that continues that continues to grow. We are north of $50 million of revenue, and we're on a path to quickly actually get up into the 70s and on a path to $100 million. Our growth is remarkable in terms of where we're headed right now.
Wow. So I'd love to dive into 500. You said 500 employees?
Roughly, yeah, a little less than that.
Wow. Being fully remote, it sounds like there's some serious advantages to that. How do you manage accountability with that many employees in a fully remote organization?
It requires you being really good upfront with sort of budgeting processes and expectations around, for example, our various clients and client relationships, and what our performance expectations are at a client, I'll call it a project or a client level for us, and setting those expectations for our teams, and then trickling that down to individual performance expectations. So if there are 10 people that are assigned to this team or this project, what's the goals for this team or this project, and then how do each of the individual contributors play a role in that, and that continuing to roll up to the overall kind of plan around the company. So it requires both establishing some clear expectations, establishing some clear accountability, and then having an infrastructure in place where you can report on what the performance is, as granular as you can possibly make it. All of us as individuals want to know how we're doing every day. And if you can't provide that feedback, it's hard to put it into perspective. Am I doing what you want me to be doing or not doing? So we've also done a lot of work in terms of both more formalizing, but I would also say using more electronic tools around things like performance reviews. And setting expectations around our management team around the frequency with which they are providing performance feedback to everyone throughout the company. So there's expectations that every one of our teams is meeting at least monthly and preferably weekly. And that each individuals on the teams are not just receiving annual year-end feedback, but at a minimum every month they're receiving some feedback on what their performance is and how they're doing, and there's this ongoing level of feedback and coaching.
Yes, and I'm a firm believer in that. So many companies out there will do an annual review, and that's the only time the employee or team member has any kind of feedback. And so you guys are getting out there and desirably every month you're looking for each employee to get some kind of coaching and feedback from their manager.
And if we can, we provide technology resources, dashboards and those sorts of things, so that day to day or week to week individuals can get a feel for how their project is doing or how they're doing individually. And we certainly have more work to do on that in this organization as we move forward, but that's our goal and where we want to get to. And then having those conversations with your direct manager and supervisors, that weekly or monthly process, monthly at a minimum. And that's somewhat also reflected in how we look to communicate with our customers as well.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's so true. If you're not growing, you're dying. And, the best organizations that I talk to and work with are those where they do have that, ongoing and often feedback. That, again, just a lot of places, they kind of forget that their best asset is their people. And the more of that they can give and work with them on getting better, so kudos to you, man. That's awesome.
It once again, I am very lucky. I have a very good team who cares a lot about our people,
Yes, absolutely.
and has a deep focus there and really wants to do best. Another component of all that is communication as well.
Yeah.
I because we're remote,
Hmm.
I say, look, I would love to have an open door policy, but I don't. So I have an open email policy.
Okay.
Literally anybody in the company can email me about any topic they have.
Yeah.
And I truly do appreciate, especially the folks who tested that out early on and were the brave ones to email the CEO and see what would happen. There's absolutely nothing punitive about it, no matter what you email me. And I make a very strong effort to get back to everybody that same day, to either let them know we're following up on something, or here's my feedback on something, or whatever it might be. So it's and then we have every month we have what we refer to as Zoomapalooza, which
Okay.
is we have an all hands remote call where we provide updates on the performance of the company. But over time, we've also incorporated our updates on individuals. So anybody in the company can submit, maybe they're having a birth or a graduation
Yeah.
or something
Awesome.
special going on. We recognize everybody's birthdays and anniversaries with the organization. And it's been such a nice way to be able to communicate and pull people together. And we've received a lot of positive feedback on that level of communication. And it's nice because it's not just the cold hard numbers of the business.
No.
We even try and make that a little
Yeah.
fun and interesting as we share that. But it's much more about our team and what's going on at an individual level, and celebrating what's going on.
Yeah, and it sounds like that's very important in building culture and open transparency that, not many people I know or talk to have this, the Zoomapalooza, the concept and, open all hands and you're going to, basically show the heart of the company and what's going on. And,
Mhm.
people really appreciate that. People really appreciate knowing what's going on straight from the top in the company on a regular basis.
I very much agree. It's I think back. I've worked for a number of organizations. I've been fortunate of some of the CEOs that I've worked with. I've been fortunate being a part of outside sort of coaching organizations and such, where I have the opportunity to engage with other CEOs,
Mm,
and learn about how they manage organizations as well. And I have definitely seen where, um, there is an ability for the CEOs to communicate personally, for the
hmm.
CEOs to
Hmm.
share more information, for the executive teams to share more information. It
Yeah.
does have an ability to create a culture where people feel more connected, and
Yeah.
humanizes things.
Wow. Wow, Jason, if we kind of look back over the nuggets that you've shared with us today, it's just amazing. I mean, the Zoomapalooza concept, that is phenomenal. If you're a CEO of a company, I can't imagine a better way to get, especially if you're fully remote, having those meetings straight from the top, communicating with the entire team. We talked about Patrick Lencioni building an executive team. I mean, you're doing the stuff that some people talk about doing. You've done it and you're living it and doing it. We've talked about your profitability, the importance of profitability when you're looking to prepare for sell and storytelling. I'll be honest with you, you're in these interviews and really working with people and preparing to exit. That is, I think you've really emphasized the importance when you prepare to sell of being that good storyteller. And so just awesome nuggets, man. Um, Let me ask you, as we kind of get down to wrap up the interview, the podcast, if you could only give one piece of advice to the 20 years younger CEO version of yourself, what would that be? And if one or two, what would those top couple be?
I'll give you two.
Okay.
One, I think I've already touched upon a little bit, and I would term that as vulnerability.
Okay.
I think as we grow up and we're in business, and especially if you're young in your career, you think about a CEO and you think that's got to be that headstrong, just everything we see on TV is come slam your fist on the table and have all the
Yeah.
answers and
Yeah.
everything else.
Right.
There is great strength in vulnerability,
Mm,
and being a human, and it's okay, especially working with your executive team and others, to talk about the challenges that you're having, to talk about, I think this is the way we should go, but let's talk a little bit more about it so that we're all around this. Or
yeah.
I'm struggling with this decision. You still got to be ready to, at the end of the day,
Right.
There are times where you just got to make the call as a CEO and head down a path.
Sure.
But having that vulnerability and those conversations, I think also vulnerability in some of the communications. And I try to model that during the Zoomapalooza calls where we're sharing information.
Yeah.
I try and share things like my son's rowing and what have you, right? Just so
Yeah.
people have an inability to connect. And I love connecting with our team. So the strength and vulnerability would be one, which I don't think is, as we're maybe going through, business schools and as we watch TV and movies, I don't think that's necessarily what ends up being stressed as something.
No, definitely not.
The other would be the importance of having the difficult conversation. If I look back on things that frankly have either really blown up for me or where I've ended up having bigger challenges, it's when I deferred or avoided having a difficult conversation that I knew I probably needed to have, or just knew I needed to have, and I just let it go and let it go. And in hindsight, I looking back on some of those examples, I just know, gosh, if I would have had that conversation a month earlier, if I would have been more transparent about what I was thinking that was making me avoid having that conversation, having a difficult conversation more timely than not overthinking it, but just talking to people. And at times talking about things that might not be comfortable about someone's performance or about direction or whatever it might be. I would just emphasize, have the difficult conversations. One, get prepared for it. Learn about it. Read about having difficult conversations. Talk to somebody you trust about the difficult conversation you need to have and role play it out so you feel comfortable with it. But don't let it linger because it will only get worse on whatever it is. And trust me, if you're looking to make a change, if you are going to have a difficult conversation, everybody else around you already knows or is waiting for you to do probably what you need to do. It's amazing also those times where I've delayed those difficult conversations, and then after having them and making a change or whatever it might be, having one of the someone who's maybe trusted or close to you come to you and go, God, we've all been waiting for you to do this.
Why didn't you do that a year ago?
The emperor has no clothes. How did you not act on this sort of earlier, right? And so just 100% of the time, if there was a difficult conversation I needed to have it earlier, and I should have done it earlier. So being vulnerable, having the difficult conversations, I would have trained myself very differently 20 plus years ago.
Awesome. Wow. That is such a nugget there, man. And it's, there's a resource I'd love to throw out for the audience. It's a book called Crucial Conversations. It's actually a great book. You've read it? Yeah. So this can help you prepare exactly for what Jason's talking about. And it almost sounds like what you're saying is like your intuition or your gut told you 6 months ago or a year ago, whatever, that you had to have that conversation, but you didn't. And then when you finally did, then the world kind of really evidenced itself by, the team then finally comes up to you and is like, hey, why didn't you do that a long time ago? But you're the CEO. They're not going to say anything to you before.
They're not. The other side of that as well is you're also doing a disservice to the other person. The other person is, if it's a performance issue, for example, the other person might be having a really hard time. They might be waiting for you, hoping that you're going to come talk to them and move them into a different role or do something different. And, if you're seeing someone struggle or something's not going right, they know it too. They're tiptoeing around you. They're whatever it might be. So just at all levels, having those conversations is often the right thing to do and doing sooner.
Yeah. Awesome. Great nuggets, Jason. Just phenomenal. Jason, thank you again for being on the show. This was amazing. There was so many just awesome things in there from a very seasoned and tenured CEO. The stuff that Jason talked about today, I can't emphasize enough that wow, it was to have that coming from you. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And thank you for tuning into the podcast. Please hit the like and subscribe button and help us spread the word about what we're trying to do here and the movement that we're on, helping business owners create enterprise value now. With that, this is Patrick Rogers with the Exitable Business Podcast, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks a lot.